Happy to welcome from Fox Sports David Helman, our guest tonight. For years, you read and listened to his work with DallasCowboys.com and their various platforms, but now he is showing his versatility with our very network. Some exciting things on the horizon, but nice to have you slumming here with the locals tonight, Dave.
How dare you? Don't sell yourself short. It is wonderful to be here with you guys. It's been a minute.
Before COVID.
Yeah.
Years.
Which somehow that was like 4 or 5 years ago. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, it's crazy. The time gets a little confusing in that regard, but good to be sitting here on the same desk with you. Interesting week, to say the least, for the Cowboys. Hard to pick a headline. How about the acquisition of Trey Lance? So let's start there. Of course, a bust in San Francisco, a guy who was thought to be a franchise quarterback, high draft pick, but now the Cowboys get him for a fourth rounder. Why do this, and why now if you're Dallas?
I mean, why do it? Because why wouldn't you want to buy a lottery ticket? Like, sure, the odds are low that it's going to hit, but if it does, I mean, spending $5 to win $1 million, it's the same idea. I mean, it's a fourth round pick, $6 million of guaranteed salary, which in the world of the NFL, I get it. To us, that's a lot of money. But in the world of the NFL, that's pennies on the dollar for a guy who was talented enough to be the number 3 overall pick. Now, sure, one of the worst decisions in NFL history by the San Francisco 49ers, but that does not mean Trey Lance is not talented. He is absolutely one of the more talented prospects of the last few years. He's got a cannon for an arm. He's 6'3", 225. He gets to sit here and develop with Dak Prescott, and if he never amounts to anything, you say, oh, it's a fourth-round pick. Now, why now? Other than that, he's clearly, he's out in San Francisco. Kyle Shanahan announced that he lost the backup job, but I was as stunned as anybody. This is not something that the Dallas Cowboys typically do. I wonder, between this, the Brandon Cooks trade, and the Stephon Gilmore trade in the offseason, this is a more aggressive Cowboy team than we're used to seeing. I hope it continues this way, because I think this is how good teams stay good. I couldn't tell you, though. I was as shocked as anybody Friday night. I looked at my phone. I think I was doing laundry, and I was like, I'm sorry, come again? What just happened? So
he's not going to have a nice, relaxing Friday night.
I was fully prepared. I was going to throw like a pizza in the oven. It was going to be great. And all of a sudden, I'm writing stories about Trey Lance. I was shocked, but a good kind of shock, for sure.
Yesterday, Dak said he was shocked, too, but they're going to welcome him in as any other teammate. But how do you feel if you're Dak? Because he said he had no idea at all. And, of course, you have Cowboys haters saying now Dak's days are numbered. Trey's going to come up behind him. How do you feel if you're him right now?
I just wonder, Jerry's smart enough to know what the perception will be regarding Dak as it relates to this move, yet he made the move anyway. So you can't convince me that there wasn't some sort of intent in that regard.
Maybe. I mean, Jerry Jones is never afraid to stir the pot about his own team. Like, this is the same guy who last September said he hoped that there would be a quarterback controversy. Like, who says that?
I know, you almost forget
He's
that
like,
he said that a year ago.
I want Cooper Rush to make it hard for me to give Dak the job back. That's a crazy thing for an owner and general manager to say. So Jerry Jones, A, he's never afraid to stir the pot. And B, again, I think if you get an opportunity to add a talent like this, if I'm Dak Prescott, I think I'm probably annoyed that I'm the $40 million man and I wasn't consulted about this.
Yeah.
Typically, you probably want a heads up, right? I mean, I think when you're on that type of contract and you mean what Dak means to this team, you probably want a little bit of input in major personnel decisions. But at the same time, I think Dak Prescott is smart enough to know I'm the franchise quarterback here. My contract makes it incredibly difficult for the Cowboys to do anything about that. And I am much better than Trey Lance. That's the crazy thing about perception is we sit here and say, oh, my God, Trey Lance has had such a rough start to his career. The 49ers were so dumb to take him. And then he gets traded to Dallas, and everybody says, he's going to take Dak Prescott.
Better than Dak Prescott.
Make that make sense. It doesn't. It's just a narrative thing. And that's, if I was Dak, I would be mildly annoyed, but in no way legitimately concerned.
So Dak called plays last night in the exhibition finale.
Did a great
Went
job.
Pretty well. Will Greer was great. Mike McCarthy calls plays starting 2 weeks from tonight against the Giants. What impact do you see that having on this offense?
I think it's an unanswerable question, especially since we didn't see the starters in the preseason. We know Mike McCarthy's history with Green Bay. We know he was in charge of some successful offenses. But until they play, I'm not going to sit here and say I know exactly what it's going to look like. But I'm glad you brought up Dak last night, because if anything, that gave me some optimism. And I'm not going to read too much into the Cowboys going against the Raiders 2s and 3s, but the guy calling those plays is the guy that's going to be getting the input on the playbook. And I think a guy of Dak's tenure and experience and skill level is going to be able to A, implement the game plan he wants, and B, have input in the moment of what they run. So I had a lot of optimism thinking like, hey, if Dak is dialing these up for somebody else, I have a feeling he can get himself into some favorable situations as well.
Well, it was an eventful week, as we know. Let's get back to that. Defensive end Sam Williams was arrested on drug and weapons charges. Jerry said at least Williams was driving slower this year when he got in trouble than he did a year ago, going nearly 100 miles per hour. Do you ever stop and think about how crazy this environment is to cover this franchise with Jerry Jones just there and saying what he says?
Every day of every week. And especially, like, I used to work for the team. I worked for DallasCowboys.com. I got a front row seat to a lot of it. It's never dull. It's always entertaining. And I'm stealing this from people on Twitter, so I'm sorry to people out there on the internet. But, and I mean, look, we don't want to make too much light of some of these legal troubles. But when Jerry said that, like, oh, well, he's down 30 miles per hour from last time, a lot of people were like, we're back, baby. These are the 90s Cowboys, the ones that were, look, they were never out of trouble off the field, and they were always winning
something
on the field. So that's what this franchise is. And again, Jerry Jones is never afraid to stir the pot around his own team, which is incredibly unique.
And speaking of Jerry and stirring the pot, on that same day, Wednesday, it was announced that DeMarcus Ware will go into the Ring of Honor. Well-deserved, obviously, but Jimmy Johnson is bypassed again. I think Jerry and Jimmy should go in together. That's my theory here. But do you think that Jerry will ever put Jimmy in?
I really hope so. And I found myself thinking when that was happening, I was like, are the Cowboys going to have to win a Super Bowl without Jimmy Johnson to heal those wounds enough to let Jerry Jones do that? I really hope that's not the case. You know, he said 2 or 3 years ago that he would do it, and he hasn't done it. Then I noticed a few people pointed out the hypocrisy of saying, well, Ware goes in because he went into the Hall of Fame this year, when a few years ago Jerry said, well, I don't want the Ring of Honor to overshadow the Hall of Fame in regards to Jimmy. So clearly there are some contradictions here. I don't know the answer, and as Jerry Jones loves to say, he is the only person in the world who can put somebody into the Ring of Honor. I hope the Cowboys win that Super Bowl so he has the peace of mind to do it, or I hope at some point cooler heads prevail, because it would be a shame if that didn't happen while both of them were able to enjoy it.
I know, you just feel like, man, he said that on our network too, at the Hall of Fame. So if he doesn't go through with it, it's a pretty bad look.
Right.
When you look to this season, which is going to begin sooner than we know it, less than 2 weeks now, basically. What's your biggest area of concern where you could say, okay, all these things are great, but what's the one thing that could take this season off the rails?
I think, and this is true for all 32 NFL teams, but you're an offensive line injury away from probably not having a fun time. You know, we saw what the interior of the Cowboys offensive line looked like during Zach Martin's holdout. Said, man, I really hope they figure things out with number 70 sooner rather than later. And they did, but you got to worry about Tyron Smith. We know how long it's been since he had a fully healthy season. What happens to Tyler Smith, the second-year guard, if he needs to switch positions? Terrence Steele, he's looked fine in the preseason, but he's coming off of an injury of his own. So everything looks set up. We talk about this all the time. This is, for my money, as complete a Cowboys roster as I've ever covered. And I've been doing this for 10 years at this point. So when I'm looking at what could go wrong, and of course every team's worried about injury, but the offensive line really is the only thing I can pinpoint that has potential to really derail this thing.
Sounds like an 8-9 season coming up. David Helman from Fox Sports. We look forward for some exciting things coming up with you and Fox here very soon. Thanks for coming in and spending some time with us.
Anytime, y'all. It was wonderful.
Appreciate
Thanks.
it.